YouTube or something.
So, all right, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We're about 2 minutes after here. Thank you so much for joining us and joining in today. I'm Janelle Best with the Howell Area Chamber of Commerce, and we have with us a great group of panelists that have agreed to present today on a very important topic. And I'm going to let them do all of the talking, but I first want to invite or introduce my co-hosts here today, our Brighton Chamber, Pam McConaughey. Pam, did you want to welcome everybody?
Hi, yes, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here. Thanks, Janelle, for organizing this. We're really excited about this program. And Katie, it's been great working with you and Janelle, like we have been through our alliance. So it's great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. And Katie Chuba with the Heartland Chamber.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's been a joy working with the Alliance, and the Alliance is the Livingston County Chamber Alliance. We've come together to bring these kind of programs to webinars, and we're working on some other things. So keep a lookout for maybe in the future and in the fall. So it's great working with my fellow colleagues, and I do want to thank our panelists today for joining us on this topic, and I'm looking forward to the education piece, and I'll let you take it back, Janelle. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie and Pam. It's been just a great pleasure putting these programs on with you guys. So I think to kick us off today is going to be Chuck. Chuck, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then feel free to share your screen?
Excellent. Thank you, Janelle. Yes, my name is Chuck Warpehoski. I am part of the ChangeWorks consulting team. Unfortunately, my colleague, Marv Fox Jr. Had something come up. He will not be with us. So you have me for content. You're missing Marv's also amazing content, but you're missing his charisma and personality as well. But I'll do my best to fill in the gap. Just to give you a sense on what the plan is for today, we're in that welcome phase. ChangeWorks will be covering the first half of the talk. People throw around this diversity, equity, and inclusion as a buzzword. Sometimes it kind of loses its meaning. So we're going to start off just by laying that foundation. What do we mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why does it even matter for you as a business leader? And how can you get started addressing it as part of your team? And then after that, we will have Nicole and Maureen from the Livingston County Diversity Alliance talk about how that really comes home to here in Livingston County. We'll have some time for question and answer before we wrap up, and we'll get you out of here by 1 o'clock. So when we say, and I'm getting an echo from somebody, so if you're not speaking right now, if you could please mute yourself. But when we say diversity, part of what we mean is we mean everything that makes people different, right? Like there are a lot of factors to diversity. It meant, did you grow up in a rural or urban environment? What is are you an analytical or a creative person? There are a lot of elements to diversity. All of the things that make us different are part of diversity, and they're all important, right? You would not want a team that is all engineers or all marketers or all lawyers. I'll hold off. I won't make the lawyer joke right there, but you need that diversity within your team when you're looking at professional criteria. And it also applies when we're looking at the human side of what makes us unique. Now, on the one hand, all of the parts that make us who we are is part of diversity. And it's also especially important to recognize the parts of diversity that make a difference, where people might have barriers to full inclusion based on their identity. So there's the broad definition of diversity around everything that makes us unique. But then there's also some of those specific things like race, religion, nation of origin, gender identity, where we want to pay specific attention around diversity. But so I'm saying we should pay specific attention around diversity, but why? Why does it matter to you as a business leader? Well, one reason it matters is because diversity affects your bottom line. McKinsey & Company have done a lot of research on this, and consistently they find that the companies that are most diverse, the companies that have the most ethnic and gender diversity in their leadership, are also the most profitable. And they've got pages and pages of other examples of where there are business benefits to having a diverse team. One of the reasons that diversity is important is because it can improve employee loyalty. And with the tight labor markets we're facing right now, where attracting and retaining quality employees is so important, what we see and what Salesforce.com through their research found is when companies are committed to things like closing the gender pay gap, making sure everybody's paid fairly by the quality of their work, these companies find that the employees are prouder to work there, and it improves retention and it improves recruitment. One of the reasons diversity can improve the bottom line is it can improve innovation. When you're bringing people with different perspectives, different lived experiences together, it helps unlock new ideas and new innovation. For example, in the academic sphere, we find that papers where there's a diverse range of co-authors on the academic paper, those papers are more likely to be cited as highly influential, recited, and become impactful in the work. Lots of data around the innovation and benefits to diversity. Part of the reason I think this is true, one is because you're bringing different experiences and perspectives together for it. The other reason is that the process of trying to work together across these differences, building those skills, building those muscles, helps when you're also facing a shared problem together. And this is all the academic stuff. This is all the journal articles and things like that. But just to make it more concrete, I mentioned earlier that you're missing Marv on today's talk. Marv is, son of a preacher. He's the one with the advanced degree, so with his master's degree. He brings a different style to this workshop. You would be paying attention better if we were mixing it up. If you had Marv's approach, my approach, that diversity in speaking approaches would help make your engagement around this better and more active, rather than just listening to one perspective. Or if you want to look at it from the pop culture, one of the most successful songs if you look at weeks on the Billboard charts in a long time, has been Old Town Road. That mix of country and hip hop, that diversity of musical styles is part of the success of that song. You might like the song, you might hate the song, but its commercial success and pop culture impact, you can't deny. And part of that is through the power of diversity. Or something that's close to my heart, and I've been stress eating my way through them over the pandemic, the Korean taco, right? Like the culinary diversity of bringing together the bulgogi and the kimchi okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to get myself hungry. I haven't had my lunch yet. These are silly examples, but they point to the power of diversity and how by creating an environment where these different influences can come together, you can come up with something that you don't get with just homogeneity. But here's the thing. Diversity alone is not enough. Diversity alone is not enough. To give you an example of this, I want you to think back to a time, it might seem like a fairy tale, but there was a time when people used to come together in large numbers at sporting events, at concerts. They didn't even wear masks. And they sat not 6 feet apart from each other, but right close together. I know it seems like it's a myth, but I tell you it's true. And when people were there, they'd have their pop, they'd have their bottle of water, they'd have their beer. And after they had that, they'd feel an urge deep down inside to use the bathroom. And if you're paying attention as people were using the bathroom, you notice something. I'm guessing the women on this call have noticed it, and the men, maybe you've noticed it, maybe you haven't. But when you're standing there, you're waiting in that bathroom line, there is a difference. And the difference is that almost always, the men's bathroom line is shorter and the women's bathroom line is longer. Maybe you've wondered why this is. I'm going to tell you. This is a secret. Not everybody knows this. The reason is there is a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy among architects and stadium designers and event planners to make the experience of women in these events worse so that men can get more tickets. We can get more seating. If there's a sold out show, we're more likely to get into that show. If there's a popular game, we're more likely to get into that game. This is a design, an intentional design to create that long line in the bathrooms. Okay. Now, at this point, you're looking down at Janelle or Katie, wondering where Pam is. Where did they get this guy? Obviously, there is no conspiracy in the bathroom designs. You're right. That difference in experience of bathroom lines is not by intent. but it is the impact. And so that's one of the key things I want you to take with you from today's talk, is that intent and impact are not the same. You can have an experience like the bathroom experience where people mean to be fair. There's no intention to create a hardship on anybody, but the impact is that kind of disparity like we see in the bathroom lines. Now, when this happens, whatever the intent is, that impact that has an effect on the people who are in there. If you're a woman in that bathroom line, you know what it feels like. If you're a man, I want you just to use your empathetic imagination and feel and imagine what it's like to see all those guys go by the line while you're standing in that longer line. Feeling that somehow your experience didn't seem as important to the architects and the designers and the event planners. Now that's one element of it, but there's lots of other ways where something can happen. Maybe it's intentional, maybe it isn't. That makes you feel like you're not fully included. Maybe it's that when you walk into a building and you see all the photos on the walls, none of them look like you or your family. Maybe it's that when you introduce yourself and you have a non-European name, somebody says, hey, can I just call you Johnny? Or can I just call you Kate? Well, they don't even try to say your name. Or say, where are you from? In a way that nobody else gets interrogated. Again, it might be an attempt to build rapport from the person who's saying it, but it creates a way where you might feel like, yeah, there's the insiders, the people who think they belong here, and I'm on the outside. And that's why we don't just talk about diversity, but we talk about inclusion as well. Inclusion is about creating that environment where people can bring their full selves. They feel like they belong. They feel like they are welcomed for who they are, and they don't have to conform and drop their name, drop their culture, drop parts of who they are to be part of the organization. Now, some of you might be sitting there on the call and you're thinking, I don't like where this is going. I think it's important that we treat everybody the same. After all, there are the same number of bathrooms in the women's bathroom as there are in the men's bathroom. Shouldn't we be treating everybody the same? After all bladders matter. And so this gets us to the next point around this. Equity is not the same as equality. Equality is treating everybody the same. Getting 10 stalls in the men's room, 10 stalls in the women's room. Equity is giving everybody the chance to have equal outcomes. Not the guarantee, right? If I spend all day in the bathroom, I'm still not going to get out on time. There's still room for personal choice, but the opportunity to do that. Some people have seen pictures kind of like this that highlight the difference. Here's some kids, they're looking over a fence trying to see the parade. Equality is giving them all the same box so that they can all try to see over the fence. But the tall kid doesn't need the box, and the short kid doesn't see over the fence even with the box. That's equality. Everybody gets a box. Equity is saying, okay, what do you each need to be able to see over the fence? Now, this is the quick presentation on here. If we had a bit more time, we'd dig into some of the questions this box raises. Think back to the bathroom example. There's a danger when you start saying this, okay, what's wrong with, in this picture, the yellow kid? Or what's wrong with the women that they're taking so long? Rather than saying what's wrong with this setup that's creating these disparate impacts. But point is, equity is addressing the barriers that people have to full participation and creating a situation where everybody has the opportunity to have a fair chance at a good outcome. So what I would love to get your thoughts on in the chat is seeing the diversity, seeing the disparity in the bathroom line example. What are some ways that we can make things more fair? What are some interventions that we could have done that would have addressed those disparities that we saw in the bathroom example? All right, I'm not seeing things in the chat, so I'm just going to name some of the ones that people have shared in previous examples on this. Some people say, Charles says, make sure women are on the design team, right? So Charles is really going upstream to say, who's even designing this in the first place? Great example, Charles. And one of the things they might say is okay, let's time how long people take in the bathroom and adjust the number of stalls to get to equal outcomes. So you might say there's going to be more stalls in the women's restrooms based on that. Now, here's the thing. There's a way to look at that and say that, if they're getting more stalls, for me as a guy, I'm getting fewer stalls, and that's taking from me. That some people look at it that way. Here's how I look at it. If I go to a game or a concert with my wife, and we both go to the bathroom, and we get back to our seats at the same time, and we get more time together, that's a win for me, right? So that change, yes, women benefit from it, but also men who are going to the event with women, we also benefit too. Another intervention that some people say is, okay, let's do family restrooms or gender neutral restrooms, right? Maybe we open up some options for that, which, yes, this is a way to address the bathroom line length disparity. And again, more people benefit. When my daughter was potty training and we'd go somewhere and there was a family restroom and I didn't have to walk her past the backsides of a bunch of guys using the urinals, I felt more comfortable, right? Like I benefited when this gender neutral bathroom piece was there. Or another example, I have a friend who used to drive truck, female truck driver, had short hair, right? Dressed, didn't dress in sort of girly feminine clothes. And sometimes when they were using the bathroom, they'd get threatened. Why are you going into the women's bathroom? You looked at the driver's license said female, but people said, you don't look girly enough for me to go into the bathroom. And it was dangerous for them to go to the bathroom. So that their safety would have been increased with having the gender neutral bathrooms as an option too. So when we start to make these changes that improve equity, everybody benefits. Back to what we said at the top of how everybody benefits from the improved innovation, the improved profitability. We are all doing better when these barriers to full inclusion, these barriers to equity are removed. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, well, that's fine. I see what it looks like in a stadium example. I see what it looks like for something like that, but I'm not an architect. I'm not building conference centers. I'm not building concert venues. What does this have to do for me as a business leader in Livingston County? Well, even if you're not building stadiums, you are probably doing some hiring. So let me give you an example of what this looks like in the hiring process. One of the things that affects how we hire, and these questions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, is something called implicit bias, where our brains are making assumptions of, this is what an engineer looks like, or this is what a school teacher looks like, or this is what a doctor looks like, and making decisions for us subconsciously that may not be the ones that our conscious brains would make. For example, there have been a lot of studies along these lines, and they all come up pretty much with the same outcome, where a researcher will send out a bunch of resumes, and they'll put on those resumes traditionally white names: Brendan, Greg, Emily, and Ann, things like that. And they'll get, depends on the research, but often it's like you've got to send out 10 resumes to get one call back for an interview. They'll take the same resumes, change the name, but otherwise all of the qualifications are the same. And they'll put a traditionally African-American name on that and say, okay, Tamika, Aisha, Rashid, or Tyrone. Still qualified at same level of qualification of the applicants, but then it takes 15 applications to get a call back for an interview. 15 applications to get the call back for the interview. Now, I don't actually think that this is because there's a bunch of unrepentant bigots in the hiring rooms. I think this is because we all carry some implicit biases, some cultural conditioning that's affecting our decisions, even when we don't want it to, right? And obviously when this happens, it's bad for the Tamikas, Aishas, Rashids, and Tyrones of the world. It's also bad for the hiring managers who are missing out on qualified applicants because they're looking at that name and they're thinking, I don't think they'll be a good fit here, even if they might be a great fit there. So back to everybody benefits from addressing DE&I, when you're missing out on qualified candidates because of implicit bias. And look, I've taken the test, I've looked at this myself. This is me too. Like, I'm not saying like I've solved this for myself. This is a common issue. And when that happens, I'm missing out on qualified applicants too. So I'm going to give you just a couple of quick things on what you can do with it. And then in the second half of the presentation, Nicole's going to go into more around some supports that you have through the Livingston Diversity Council on this. The first thing is to recognize that you've got to see it, right? So if you're able to disaggregate the data by race and other factors, that helps you realize there's disparities there, right? So back to the previous slide, if you're able to look at your applicant pool and say, who's applying versus who are we calling back? That gives you some insight into that. Or if you've got customer satisfaction data or employee satisfaction data, if you're able to disaggregate that, look at it by different slices. Is the experience of women coming to your restaurant different than men? How do you do that? And how do you upgrade it? So how do you build it up so that everybody's having a great experience, which is also going to be better for your bottom line? Maybe you want to consider anonymizing your applications, right? Maybe before somebody looks at that stack of resumes, somebody else is going through and crossing out the names so you don't get that, that false signal by a name that might trigger implicit bias. A third quick suggestion is to post widely. I know a lot of businesses, a lot of nonprofits will hire through referral. Hey, existing employees, do you know anybody who'd be good? Go ahead, send them our way. If it works out, we'll give you a referral bonus. There's a lot to be said for referral-based hiring. The problem is it's also a recipe for sameness, right? We live in separated communities. We live in segregated communities. The scientists say that 91% of white people's social networks tend to be white. So if you're asking a homogeneous group for referrals, you're going to get homogeneous referrals. So if you instead say, okay, how do we expand our net? How do we tap into different networks for talent? That's going to help you get that diversity win. Finally, evaluate candidates against clear criteria that indicate success in the job. Not do we think Rashid is going to be a good cultural fit, but these are the criteria we've seen ideally from past successful employees. This is exactly what we're looking for. Does Rashid meet these criteria? Does Emily meet these criteria? If yes, then they advance. When you're very specific about what you're looking for in an applicant, you are giving that implicit bias less room to have an impact on your hiring decisions. This isn't about lowering the bar. This is about making sure that you've got clear criteria that everybody can get through and that you're making fair hiring decisions that give you the best chance of having a qualified applicant and the people you hire the best chance to be successful in the job. This was just a super quick version of it. If you want a copy of the slides, put your email in the chat box. I'll send them off to you. Also a free ebook on overcoming implicit bias. Or watching this on the later video, you can email me at chuck@changeworksllc.com. And I'll hand it over to Nicole.
Great, thank you so much, Chuck. It looks like perhaps Chuck might be frozen, and I can't screen share until his goes off. So we'll give him a second, and hopefully that can happen fairly quickly here. Oh, perfect. Here we go. All right. Great. All right, we're coming up. Just give me 2 seconds here. And you get us on to the right screen. All right, great. All right, you should all see my screen here. Hopefully Chuck can pop back on and join us. So I'm here for the second part of today's session to address kind of the local impact of what we just talked about. Obviously, it was a kind of a quick conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. What we find and what we have found is that in addressing and impacting work with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we need to also understand the environment and the atmosphere at which we operate under those conditions, and attempting to, address the diversity, equity, and inclusion within our own businesses also relies on addressing it or comparing it against what the kind of macrocosm around us also is like with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so first couple of slides that I'm going to share with you are probably nothing new to you, and it's kind of a love-hate relationship that we have here in Livingston County with our history. We have some really, really great history here in Livingston, and this by no means is meant to minimize all of the wonderful things that we do have in Livingston County. As a Livingston County, what I would call myself as a native to Livingston County, I moved here when I was 10. Graduated from local high school here in Livingston, and I still live and raise my kids in Livingston County. I love the community, but it is also really important that we address our past. And so while racism is not exclusive to our community, we do have a unique and critical connection to it. So for those of you that are or are not aware, we're just going to do a little 30-second education about Robert Miles, who was Michigan's Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon for about 20 plus years in the early 20th century. And he was responsible, along with some other folks, for the large-scale Pontiac bus bombing in 1971, which was in response to forced integration within the schools. At that time, Miles, along with some of his cohorts, were convicted of sedition in 1973. During the time that he was in Livingston County, in Cohocton Township, he did operate the Mountain Church and held weekly cross burnings every Sunday. So this is a part of our history, and it's important to, again, acknowledge that it was there. That being said, I hear from a lot of folks that, it was one guy and he encouraged a lot of other bad guys to do the thing, but this wasn't who our community was. And I definitely don't have an argument with you there. I'm going to challenge us in a little bit. So in 2005, even after Miles's death, there was a controversial auction that was held at the Gray Auction House in downtown Howell, which was to sell off Miles' effects. The one thing that I think was really great about that particular situation is that the community did come together and express their with the action of the auction house, of saying this isn't something that we really want to revisit. This isn't something that we want to celebrate. And a lot of those items ended up going into museums and for use in historical and educational contexts, rather than in celebration for somebody to hold, in honor maybe of the action taken back at that time. So again, some really great steps that our community took at that time to address that within our community. So according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, there is no current Klan activity in Livingston County. And I think a lot of people, again, that's an argument that we hear a lot, is that, this was back then and this was this guy, and we don't have this here anymore. Where we find some challenges still is that we are listed as, Brighton and Howell specifically, are listed as sundown towns. And a sundown town, for those of you that are not familiar, are areas in which it is not safe for a person of color or a person of a minoritized population to be seen after sundown, after dark, that it is not identified as a safe community. There are certainly action steps that we can take to get off of the sundown town list, and that is something that we are exploring because there's been a lot of really great work done in this community. But again, I'll challenge us, if there is no Klan, is there still racism? Well, The simple answer is yes. And I think we can all agree that, racism takes very many different levels. It's from the systemic level, the institutionalized level, the organizational level, interpersonal level, and then down to the individual level. But obviously, there are still folks who have and hold certain beliefs. And so racism does exist. The larger scale of racism that and fears by persons of color who are coming into or out of the county. Stories that we hear on a regular basis of folks who are cautious or just simply avoid the Livingston County area based on the past history, and them not being able to see the change that we have made in the county. They are the racism still that exists here, as well as other counties, is evidenced by daily interactions experienced by residents of color. And that it's also evidenced by a lack of diversity in our community. A lot of folks will say, why do we talk about diversity when we don't have diversity? And my response is usually the reverse. We don't have diversity because we don't talk about diversity, or we haven't done a good enough job at really promoting what we do in Livingston County. And this is, again, kind of my challenge to all of us, and the Diversity Council's challenge to all of us, is that there is some really great work that's been done, and we need to provide some opportunities to celebrate those and acknowledge those as well. So because of our past, it has a broader impact. Communities that are linked with the oppression of one group are often seen as oppressive to other groups. So it's an assumption that's made, oftentimes ill-informed, but certainly an assumption that's made is that if a community is not open to minoritized populations of one, they're not necessarily open to minoritized populations of another. And so we can see, again, kind of historical context of things happening. And I'm also going to say, again, this is not unique to Livingston County. Every community struggles with oppression, with racism, with homophobia, with sexism, all of those things, some intentional and some not intentional. But these are things that we still struggle with, that still continue that narrative that we as a community really want to move away from. And I hear that and I see that people want to move away from that narrative. So, you see just in front of you some examples of the last several years of incidents that have happened, larger scale or smaller scale, impacting single families, impacting individuals, or impacting a broader group of folks. Unfortunately, because of our history, we also tend to command attention when things happen in our community. And I think especially now, as we're working on diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, people are being looked at with a microscope. Communities are being looked at with a microscope. And so there are those opportunities that come up in every community, but we tend to receive some of that focused attention on those issues. So what we really hope to do and what we hope to accomplish with our next steps within our Livingston County community is to attend to acknowledgement and ownership of our past, because that is certainly the key for change. To say that it didn't exist, or to say that that is not who we are, is really important. It is not just something that we should forget that has happened. To say that this has happened and this is what we do to address those things, taking that ownership and moving it forward. So the Diversity Council sits in Livingston County as a volunteer nonprofit board of directors. We do not currently have any paid staff that work to achieve the mission and the vision of the council. The Diversity Council was started in 1987. So we see a lot of folks that are surprised, one, the fact that we have a Diversity Council, and two, that we're celebrating 34 years this year. But the Diversity Council came together to address the very sheer thing that we're talking about today, is changing that narrative for folks and letting people know that just because these incidences, issues arise in Livingston County, this does not define our community. And so as a mission, the Diversity Council sees ourselves as a change agent for diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. In order to make those changes, we collaborate with folks, we educate folks, and we really empower folks to be a part of the solution to build the thriving community that we know that Livingston County is in so many ways and in so many facets, and how amazing and supportive of a community that it can be. And we've all experienced some of those really great things as a part of our community. So the vision, kind of our end goal, and vision statements are hard because it assumes that you're going to arrive somewhere, right? And in this work, I don't know that we're going to ever arrive. And that's kind of the point, is that we will always be transforming. We will always be learning. We will always be working towards making it better for everybody. And so our vision is that Livingston County will be a transformative that embraces and empowers all people for their uniqueness and contributions. Just a little snapshot of our board of directors. Again, we operate as a nonprofit board of volunteers. No one is paid for their service at this time. And so you see we've got some broad representation to look at how diversity, equity, and inclusion is impacting various institutions and industries within Livingston County. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we also have some retired community members who we call our civic leaders, who are not representative of an agency, but just there of their own individual passion for the work that's done. And so we really appreciate all of the work of our representation from different industries, as well as our civic leaders in the community. We operate much like a lot of other organizations do, with some internal committees to do the internal organizational work, but also really rely on our community action committees and engagement with other folks within the community. This work can't be done just by a small group of folks. And there are a lot of folks that want to be a participant of the change. And so we have several community action committees. Pride Alliance of Livingston, addressing our LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning community members, friends, families, and neighbors. Our community conversations work group that really approaches the need for conversations around this work and to find our legitimate place in that work within our community. Our training committee, because education is powerful. Knowing more means we can do better and do more with each other. And then our diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools is one of our newer committees. And really that role is just to support the work of our schools and ensure that our schools are feeling supported and have access to different resources and things within our community to support our students, because we do have a diverse body of students that needs to feel supported in our districts as well. So I always love a call to action slide, and there's going to be a little bit more action in a few moments specific to this webinar, but always interacting with us on social media. Upcoming programs, again, education is really key. So we have our Learn, Love, Livingston series, which is once a month, and it is online. And our next series session is scheduled for May 19th, and it's entitled Allyship, What It Is and How to Show Up. How do you become, or how do you act as an ally? Past programming of that series can be found on our Livingston Diversity YouTube channel. And then Pride Month 2021 is coming up in June, and there's activities that are happening in Howell, in Brighton, in virtual realms, as well as across our community. You can become a member of the council, visit our bonfire store as a fundraiser for the initiatives of the council, and commit to action with our organizational resolutions, which are officially launching in July of 2021. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but I want to turn it over to Maureen Elliott, who is a financial advisor with Edward Jones, and her office is located here in Brighton. Maureen, if you want to jump on.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what my experience has been here while being in Livingston County. I want to start out first by saying that I really enjoy this community, and I think that this is a great event to be putting on. I've been in this community for the past 10 years, and I have to say that I was pretty scared as a gay woman to be coming into Livingston County, really due to the stigma that it has. It made me not feel fully comfortable with sharing aspects of my personal life. And, it made me stay, quote unquote, closeted for over 7 years until I got to know more people in the community. And when I did finally come out, everyone seemed very welcoming in Heartland. So I think sometimes, just being able to show that you're welcoming, being able to show that you support the community, that you support all aspects of people, gives that, those unspoken fears, kind of takes those unspoken fears away. Now really is the time that we have to start stepping out of our comfort zone and think about what we can do for our business to continue with forward progress. So, some of the things, for example, Pride Alliance has a window cling that you can hang up in your window. And that's a great way to just show that you welcome all types of people and you welcome everyone into your business. Also, to offer benefits to domestic partners. I'm fortunate enough to work for a firm that does that, and it's great to be able to put a domestic partner on our benefits. Inclusion is good for the economy, and people need to realize that. And I think, businesses have an opportunity, especially businesses in this area, to make a real change. So having educational sessions for your employees and making sure that everyone feels welcome. So I think the biggest thing is just starting to have these conversations and showing people that you're open to them. There isn't a person on the call that doesn't know someone who is of a different color or of a different orientation than them, but being open and available to get to know them and to help them feel more welcome, I think is a great way to start. I can say again, that once I did finally, it was a personal issue and fears that I had to overcome. But once I finally did, I felt nothing more than welcomed in the Heartland area community. So, take time to invest in culture and your benefits, and think about what's best for the overall community.
Great. Thank you so much, Maureen. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience. And again, this is just really proof positive that a lot of the struggle that we have within our Livingston County community and beyond our kind of our boundaries is the narrative that has been told over and over again about our community. And so, working to change that narrative, and that is really our next and last piece in today, which is the focus of our organizational resolutions. And so this is an opportunity for our organizations, agencies, businesses to jump on and be a part of the solution within Livingston County. So the goals of this initiative are one, to enhance the way that business is done in Livingston County by prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is not to say that businesses and organizations aren't already somewhat doing this work. We know that everyone is in a different place in this journey. Some are just new to this. Some are still kind of considering and understanding what this actually means for them as an organization, and some have been doing it for a couple of years. So it's just a way to enhance what we're doing, to attract a more diverse workforce to the community. That is something that I hear over and over again from our local businesses, from our local organizations, that they really want to attract that diverse workforce, and they really struggle to get folks to apply to jobs. And then to really, the overarching goal is to change the perception of Livingston County by creating a new narrative. I hear from folks all the time that is not who we are, that is not who we are. We don't want people to think that about us anymore. And so my response is always, we need to show that we're not there. We keep saying we're not that, and we know we're not that. Certainly as individuals, some of us know that we aren't that, but how do we show that to folks in and outside of the county? And this is an opportunity to do that. So the process, the initiative is this: you let us know you're interested to be a part of this organizational resolution. It is a pledge to action, if you will. We'll get you a packet to explore what that looks like for your organization, whether you're a nonprofit organization, a business with 3 employees, or a business with 200 employees. There's lots of different ways that this can be rolled out. You determine your action items, what it is that we want to do. We want everybody to sign on to at least one action item that they hope to achieve or to work on by December of 2021. So you determine your action item by that July 2021, and you start the work. And that could be anywhere from showing visible signs of support of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the community, whether that is a proclamation that your organization makes about diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it is bringing in some educational opportunities, whether it is engaging your staff and your employees about how to have conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that content without being polarizing, without being political, because human issues are not political issues, and we struggle with that for sure. And so some of us need some parameters around that. So start your work, and then at the end of the year, at end of 2021, we get to share our progress with the community. What progress was made with each one of those individual organizations. And those organizations then get to be the pilot for our new group of folks signing on in 2022 to start their organizational resolutions. So really cool stuff. We've got some great researched options as far as action items and how to implement those changes within your organizations. You can also create your own. So there's an opportunity to customize all of those pieces. So we're really excited to roll that out with all of our Livingston County support systems. So now it's for our Q&A, and I know that there's been some questions in the chat box that I believe we can now start addressing.
All right, thank you to all of our panelists today for sharing some great information. I know that Chuck, I think, had volunteered to facilitate the Q&A. So Chuck, if you want to go ahead and do that, that would be awesome.
I was asking if you would do it, but either way is fine. So
okay.
Why don't you
I
ask
thought you
the question?
volunteered. I misread.
Go for it, and then Nicole and Maureen can pop off who wants to respond.
There was a question, I think that came in from Charles Hughes. He's stating that the challenge is fear of how you'll make me feel if you support others that are not like me. How can we do this work without fragmenting those who will say, what about me? Who wants to answer?
Nicole, go for it.
I can certainly take that one. So I think it's really challenging, right? I think this is a journey for all of us, and there are ways to address creating an inclusive environment with all minoritized populations, and that is I think probably part of the struggle and what keeps most folks silent, because they don't know how to be inclusive with all folks. So part of that is coming from the perspective of the organizational resolutions, is looking at our policies and procedures from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, and ensuring that we are addressing, all of our actions are purposeful. So we're looking at that through the lens of persons of color. And so, does this concern address the need here? Does this concern, or does this issue, does this action item address folks that might identify with gender identity or sexual orientation, religious affiliations? And looking at all of those lenses as we go through the work. And it's not an easy thing.
Did Nicole freeze for all of you?
Okay, yeah, I was wondering.
All right, I will keep filling time until she gets back. So just to fill, so another approach to that too is a couple of things. One, I think that it's important to set the goal, to begin with the end in mind. And if our goal is organizations where everybody feels welcomed, then we can ask, what is it going to take for each member of the community to feel welcomed? There's a framework around targeted universalism where we say, okay, what is the goal that everybody wants? And then what are the specific interventions that we will need to achieve that goal? So that's being clear that on that is one help. The other thing that was part of Charles's question further on is, the risk that somebody says, if you put up that symbol or shingle that says you are safe here, but somebody says that's not me, so you care more about them, isn't that divisive, and is it potentially bad impact? Well, I think a key question, and this is partly where the data, asking the data comes in, is potentially bad impact for whom, right? Maureen shared her story about feeling anxiety around coming out in Livingston County. And one thing we know about gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual youth is that their suicide rates are a lot higher than straight and cisgender youth. And so if we say, we're not going to put that sign out that says Pride Zone or LGBTQ safe zone, and we're not going to do things to help address that disparity we see, because we're afraid that we might upset the straight kids, then that might, that you might ruffle some feathers by putting it out, but by denying that access to say, here's what's going to help these kids who are more vulnerable because of the societal messages that say that they're not welcome here, that the impact on them is much greater and much more severe than the impact on maybe ruffling some feathers about that say, hey, what about me? I'm straight, don't my relationships matter? So getting really clear about who we're talking about and what the impacts on those are is important. So Nicole, I was just filling some time while we waited for you to come back. If other people have questions in the chat, please do share them. We want to hear from all of you. Nicole.
Thanks, Chuck. I heard, I think, most of what you're saying, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been logged off twice. It's been great all morning. I actually told my kids to jump offline. They're doing school, and I was like, sorry, I trump you. I get to the internet. We'll see. So yeah, I think that's a great response, Chuck. And I think, it is a difficult journey. But I think also when we do things like putting up a sign that says all are welcome or all are safe here or something like that, and people, people have their feelings about what it need to be able to address our intention with that, to be able to explain this is why we made that choice. And so again, everything that we do needs to be purposeful. And so that doesn't necessarily mean it's quick. And I think that can be a frustration for folks that want to see some change, but we know that good systemic change takes time. And that has been my role in my professional career for the past 22 years is social change, and nothing sustainable and good comes quickly, because we need to all understand where we are, why we're doing it, and the impact that it's having on all other folks as well.
Okay, do we have any other questions? If you do, go ahead and type those in the chat now. I just see a comment came in from Liz. She said she thanks everybody and found the discussion compelling as it related to performance enhancing, innovation producing, and workforce around DEI. So, right. Is there any? Everybody's thank you. So I think that's all of our questions then. If anything else comes in, or you guys want to reach out to Chuck, Nicole, or Maureen separately, I believe we have all of their contact information. This webinar was recorded, so we will have that out and available to you as well. Any last minute words, anything that anybody else wants to share? All right, awesome. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you so much. I was just gonna say, if you want more information about the organizational resolutions, please drop your email in the chat or send an email to myself, Livingston Diversity Council @gmail.com, and we can start talking about what that might look like for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. It was a wonderful presentation. I appreciate all of your time and energy that you guys have put into this. And we look forward to continuing this conversation. All right, everybody have a great rest of your week, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.